Okay, today we're going to talk about a skill that is absolutely essential for your mental health, for your relationships, everything really. It's about setting boundaries. So if you're feeling tired, drained, or even a little bit resentful, stick around. We are going to figure out how to get your peace back.
I wanted to start with this quote from Cheryl Richardson because, wow, it just gets right to the heart of it, doesn't it? That feeling of being torn, of saying yes out loud when your entire body is screaming no, that's not peace. That's an internal battle, and man, is it exhausting. So let me ask you this. Do you ever hang up the phone or walk away from a conversation just feeling depleted or maybe resentful? Or how about that twist of guilt you feel for just wanting something for yourself? If any of that sounds familiar, you're in the right place.
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to talk about that war inside you. Then we'll get really clear on what boundaries actually are. After that, we'll get practical with a guide on how to set them. Then we'll dive into decoding the guilt trip, because that's a big one. And finally, we'll tackle the toughest arena of all, family.
Okay, so what in the world are boundaries anyway? I love this analogy. Think of them as your personal property line. They're the invisible fence that marks where you end and another person begins. They are absolutely essential for protecting yourself. The textbook definition is a limit or edge that defines you as separate from others. Your skin, right? That's a super obvious physical boundary. But we also have these invisible, emotional, and psychological boundaries. And honestly, those are just as real and maybe even more important to protect.
This chart lays it all out so clearly. Look at the left side with healthy boundaries. You value your own opinion, you can say no without spiraling into guilt. Now look at the right. That's the unhealthy side. It's all about people-pleasing, feeling like you have to manage everyone else's feelings, and just ending up totally drained. Just take a second. Which column feels a little more familiar to you?
All right, so let's get into the how. It's one thing to know you need boundaries, but it's a whole other thing to actually set them, right? So here is a super simple 3-step guide from psychotherapist Nidra Glover Tawwab that makes it feel way more doable. Step 1, be clear. Just state your need simply and calmly. Step 2, be direct. This is a big one. Say what you want, not what you don't want. So instead of saying, "Stop calling me so late," you could try, "I'd really appreciate it if you could call before 9 p.m. See the difference? And then there's step 3, and this is the hardest one. Be ready. Be ready for the discomfort, especially that feeling of guilt that's probably going to show up.
And let's be honest, that guilt can feel like a tidal wave. I mean, if you've spent your whole life being a people pleaser, setting a boundary can feel just awful, like you're being selfish or mean. But that feeling is a totally normal part of this process. The trick isn't to make the guilt go away. The trick is to learn to sit with it, to tolerate it, without immediately caving and taking back the boundary you just fought so hard to create.
You know that feeling of guilt? It's often no accident. It can be a tool, a very effective tool of manipulation. You know it as the classic guilt trip. So let's decode it, because for a lot of us, this is the biggest hurdle we face. Does this sound familiar to anyone? That heavy, loaded phrase, "after all I've done for you." Ugh. Or maybe it's not even words. Maybe it's just the cold shoulder. You know, that sudden chill in the air right after you've dared to do something for yourself? Yep, those are grade A guilt trips in action. This isn't just someone being difficult. It's a recognized form of emotional manipulation. Researchers actually have a name for it: psychological control. It's basically a way of controlling someone without using any physical force, and it works by combining 2 very specific tactics. Okay, so here's how it breaks down. First, you have what's called intrusiveness. Think of this as the what. It's someone interfering in your personal space, your thoughts, your feelings, your choices. And then you have emotional manipulation. This is the how. It's the tactics they use, like making you feel guilty or withdrawing affection, or making you feel like your feelings don't matter. When you see both of those things happening at the same time, that's psychological control. And all of this brings us to the one place where these dynamics are often the most intense, the most powerful, and frankly, the most painful: our families. This is, without a doubt, the toughest terrain to navigate when it comes to boundaries. So why is that? Why is it that you can say no to a friend and it's okay, but saying no to your mom or your dad feels like you're starting World War III? What is it about our families that makes this so uniquely difficult?
Well, experts usually point to 3 big reasons. First, your family history. Your childhood basically programs your idea of what's normal in a relationship. Second is a concept called enmeshment. That's when personal boundaries in a family are so blurry that trying to be your own person can feel like a massive betrayal. And third, there's that deep, deep conditioning of guilt and obligation. This belief that the family's needs have to, always, come before your own.
And this is exactly why family gatherings can feel like walking through a minefield. A simple eye roll from a parent can feel like a total invalidation of who you are. One offhand comment can trigger a lifetime of criticism. And underneath it all is that very real fear of being rejected or cast out. It's powerful stuff, and it can make it incredibly hard to stand your ground as an adult.
And this right here, this is probably the most important thing I want you to take away from all of this. Setting a boundary isn't selfish. It is not an act of rejection. It is actually an act of love. It's an act of love for yourself, yes, but also for the relationship itself. It's the only way to protect your connection from being poisoned by resentment over time.
So, I'm going to leave you with this one question. Don't think about rebuilding every wall overnight. That's overwhelming. Just ask yourself, what is one small, manageable boundary you can set, maybe even this week, just to protect your own peace? Start there. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.